Welcome back. We're going to get off of impeachment now and get out of Washington for a few minutes and also take a look at something that's actually happening on college campuses from coast to coast. I'm talking about, in many cases, the stifling of dissenting voices. Barack Obama, he recently addressed this during an event for his foundation.
One danger I see among young people, particularly on college campuses, I do get a sense sometimes now among certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. And that's enough. That's not activism. That's not bringing about change. You know, if all you're doing is casting stones, you know, you're probably not going to get that far.
And this phenomenon, it's playing out in a host of ways. Big-name comedians like Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, they've said they won't perform on college campuses because if they feel that they say the wrong thing, their careers could take a hit as a consequence. Well, my next guest, he runs a college in our area, and he was featured in a piece in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago that addresses this issue. It is called The Reopening of the Liberal Mind. Bard College President Leon Botstein, he joins us now. Leon, thank you for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
You had a situation where you made a decision as to a former professor who had gone on to become the editor of the New York Review of Books, Ian Buruma. He was pushed out there after he published an essay by some celebrity who had been accused by multiple women of sexual assault, but then acquitted in court. At least in my understanding, it wasn't a tough call for you to bring him back into the faculty. And as almost of equally surprise or not in today's day and age, you didn't get a pushback from either faculty or from the student body. What went into that decision, and was it a tough call for you?
Well, I don't think it was a tough call. First of all, he's a very distinguished individual, had been on our faculty for a considerable period of time. Second, he wasn't the person on trial. He made a decision as an editor of a journal to publish an article, and some people thought the article was a poor act of poor judgment or in bad taste, or it wasn't framed properly. Now, in a climate where you have free speech, ideally, you should be able to listen to somebody whom you actually think is desperately wrong, and where you think the views are truly obnoxious. I happen to think that we should have the discipline of listening to our opponents. I'm better informed to fight for what I believe in by listening carefully to the people who I think are wrong. And dissent requires the ability to listen. But that's not, at our current moment, the popular view.
No, obviously we're in this silo culture where you wear red or blue, but I'm curious how you go about deciding who to give a platform to, and I'll give two specific examples. Years ago, not that many years ago, but obviously after the Iraq War, Condoleezza Rice was invited to speak at the commencement at Rutgers University. The offer was extended by the school, but there was such blowback by the student body. And listen, I'm not a fan of how the war was carried out or the intelligence that justified it, but she certainly, I thought, earned a right to speak. Conversely, Ann Coulter, you know when she comes up there, she's going to intentionally be incendiary, and she'll feel it's a success if, in fact, she has a divisive response. How do you navigate between those two polar sides, even if they're not popular with the student body, who you as the ultimate decision maker decide, yes, I'll give that one a microphone, or no, I won't give that one?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm not the ultimate decider. I mean, yes, I'm finally held responsible for what happens. But the invitations come from many different sources, students, faculty, and we don't censor, we don't filter. So let's take the Condoleezza Rice. That's a good example where the institution gave her a platform. I would say a commencement address is very different from coming on campus to speak, because a commencement address doesn't have a response. The great thing about free speech on a campus is that there's no such thing, with maybe the exception of the commencement address, where you can't ask a question, you can't push back, you can't contest what someone says. The commencement speech is a one-way deal. That is to say, someone's talking at the audience, and there's nothing coming back. But Ann Coulter, for example, coming on campus, you can't come, you shouldn't be able to come on a college campus unless you're willing to give time for question and answers and rebuttal. So you can't simply hit and run speech. You can't simply say what you think and walk away. You have to be able to withstand the criticism and scrutiny. And that's the difference. The Condoleezza Rice invitation looked to the student body as an endorsement because it was a one-way street. She was representing the institution at the moment the students got their diplomas. That's a very special case.
You believe in a diversity of thought. I'm curious, what do you believe, use Bart as an example, after 4 years, what do you believe the college's responsibility is in sending out a fully formed person in that I think young people get cheap shots because they believe that, you know, in this digital age that they're surface level. I'm amazed by some of the people that come out in their young 20s right now and how much more of a global view they did than maybe my generation. But I don't think it's just innuendo to suggest that there is a much more sensitive nature to many coming out if they don't get a suitable amount of praise, if they don't hear what they like, that they feel threatened to that end. The idea of these triggers or trigger warnings or safe spaces, not to date you or I, but if we didn't hear something we liked, we had to deal with it, and we weren't in many ways mollified to make sure that we were fine just because we heard a different school of thought. How do you navigate that?
Look, it's very hard. We are in a time when, especially post 9/11, where the parental population and the adult population in many quarters wants to shield their children from discomfort. We seem to have lost, certainly since the age of the people who grew up in the Depression during the Second World War, we want to sort of spare sort of suffering and discomfort. We also, partly because of social media, we're less accustomed to talking to our neighbors and our fellow citizens who don't agree with us. We've lost the ability to listen to another point of view. And we are also readily offended. The quote you played from President Obama is very much on point, that as opposed to arguing, let's say you and I disagree, the easiest way to stop the conversation is to call you a name, is to place judgment on you. It's not that you and I disagree, but you're morally inferior because you don't believe what I believe. So it's not only that we disagree about the facts or the arguments or the circumstance, is that your being on the other side of the argument makes you a lesser person. The way I argue against you is to make you feel as if you're sort of inferior because you don't hold my views. Now that is a terrible thing to do, and my expectation is that if a student comes out of college, she or he should be able to have the tools to figure out what they believe, should have the tools to figure out on what basis they might change their beliefs. I would hope that I'm still capable of changing my mind when faced with evidence and faced with good reasons and ideas I never thought of, or arguments I never thought of, or facts I didn't know. The idea that we have to hold absolute beliefs on every subject. There are many subjects in which I actually don't have an opinion. There are many subjects in which I don't think there is a final opinion. There are many subjects in which I hold maybe contrary opinions. And to keep an open and critical mind and to be able to figure out what you think and be able to express it and to ask questions, not only argue by assertions. You know, I have learned more from listening to people who don't believe what I believe than I've learned from listening to people who already know what they believe, and I've already thought it myself. I'm not a believer in God. I'm an agnostic. I'm not an atheist because I don't know there is no God. I don't have a good answer to the question. I don't fully understand the question. But I very much respect the people who believe, and I've learned a lot from hearing them talk about their belief, even though it's something I don't believe. And that habit of curiosity and tolerance Take the worst case, in my case, because I'm Jewish, listening to anti-Semites, reading Nazi literature. It's extremely important to do so, because you then don't understand the irrationality and the persistence of certain kinds of hate and racism. So closing your ears to the things you don't want to hear is harming yourself.
President Botstein, fascinating conversation. I really do appreciate the time, and best of luck for the balance of the school year.
And I appreciate your interest. Thanks.
A look at what we call the Fox effect. Now, we know that the network is pushing the president's agenda. That much is beyond debate. But the question is, how much of an impact is it having? We'll get into that after this.